Hey everybody, welcome back to Pathway to Purpose with Mukunda Madhava. We're in the Pathway to Progress live streams. I missed last week, my Guru Maharaj Bhakti Marg Swami from Toronto. He's Hare Krishna. He was initiated by Srila Prabhupada, and he came for the Rath Yatra festival. So it's a big festival for Jagannath. Anyone who was following my channel, maybe I'm hoping you saw my uh, the short I did with the Jagannath festival, with the Rath Yatra festival. So, last week it just ended up being crazy. I was kind of on a roll for four days in a row, and I was planning on doing the whole week. And I think sometimes that's one of the things I tend to do. I'm sure I'm not just the only one, but a lot of people I bite off more than I can chew sometimes, and um, what I used to do is I would just push through, and often I would kind of either fail or get so discouraged just in the outcome or how I felt after the effect that I would end up, often just quitting. And one of the things that I've tried to kind of get better at is just understanding my limitations, understanding when I need to kind of pull back, and especially with the kids and the babies, and trying to help my wife with just the being a parent of two little girls under two. Sometimes I have to kind of stop some of the things that I'm hoping to do. And for me personally, one of the biggest things I've been learning lately is that both success and failures they're simultaneously teaching us things all the time. And it's just so often we get so hyper focused on the negative aspects of things that um, we don't see the positive in it. We don't see the positive in our struggles. We don't see the growth that we actually do achieve. And for a long time, like, that was one of the things you often hear with success gurus and things like this, is that nothing's really a failure if you can take lessons out of it, if you've learned something from it. And for so long, I'd look back and I was so just tunnel vision and hyper focused on my failures that often I wouldn't be able to take any of the positives out of anything like that. And so and that kind of leads, we're moving at the end of the month, and I was kind of wondering if I should even keep up with these live streams at all. And I wanted to this morning, and then things kind of got crazy. I was trying to stick to the same 4 o'clock, but at the same time, I don't really have a lot of viewers right now. And I saw there was like 30 or 40 viewers last time, actually, in my last video, and I was really happy. And that's actually what motivated me just to kind of get back on the horse and just do this, because like I said, we're gonna have a really big move. And the back, you can see the background behind me, it's still a little messy because I was in the process of building down here. And obviously, even just being able to live stream and have the equipment to do that, it's takes a lot. And I finally got it all pretty much to a place that I was happy with, and almost immediately we got notice that we have to move. The owners are selling the house. They say they're selling the house. I really think the way rents and everything are right now, I think so much of it is just them wanting to get more out of the rent. And even that, it's a big thing about it is that I was really scared. We were really upset about it. Again, with two children, two babies under two, it makes it really tough, and it makes you scared to anything to change. And so much of it is just the mind, and how the mind plays tricks on us and really makes us really see the negative things in it, and gets into this mode of what are we going to do. And that really brings us today to the verse I want to cover in today's class. I was going to say class, I guess it is a class, but just in today's live stream is verse 6.5 from the Bhagavad Gita. So we were kind of going through verse by verse. Not that I wasn't enjoying it, but this for what I'm going through right now, and I think that's one of the biggest things that I want to stay true to with this with my channel, is obviously we're going to stick on a similar topic style, especially with the live streams. At the new house that we actually got a house yesterday. We saw a house yesterday, and I don't want to get too hard ahead of ourselves, but it looks pretty positive. Hopefully we'll get it. And it's a really nice kitchen for I'm hoping to be able to do some cooking videos as well. and it's a beautiful island in the middle of it. And as soon as we kind of walked in, both my wife and I got really excited, and I just start to see maybe this is a positive thing, maybe this isn't a negative. And so just in that whole stream of consciousness that I've had, and that realization that maybe this is all a good thing, and looking at things in the positive sense, what really came to my mind was verse 6.5 from the Bhagavad Gita. So we're going to go over that verse today. Hold on. So I will share it with you with the screen. Let's make boom. Boom. Yeah, so I hope everybody can see that. I'll get my ugly face out of the way here. Try to make it a little bit bigger. That's hopefully pretty good. So today's verse 6.5, is actually one of my favorite verses of all from the Bhagavad Gita. Uttared atmanatmanam natmanama fasadayet atmaiva yatmano bandur atmaiva ripur atmanaha. So a lot of atman, right? So the atma is it denotes us. So we're jivas, which are like living entities, and that's our soul, right? But the atma itself denotes our mind, body, and soul. So Prabhupada, we're going to actually read the purport as well from Prabhupada, and then I'll summarize it a little bit, because he kind of gets into some complicated language a little bit, just with the way he's talking about it. So one must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. The word Atma denotes mind, body, and soul, depending upon different circumstances. In the yoga system, the mind and the conditioned soul are especially important. Since the mind is the central point of yoga practice, Atma refers here to the mind. The purpose of the yoga system is to control the mind and to draw it away from the attachment to sense objects. It is stressed herein that the mind must be so trained that it can deliver the conditioned soul from the mire of nescience. In material existence, one is subjected to the influence of the mind and the senses. In fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with the false ego, which desires to lord it over material nature. Therefore, the mind should be trained so that it will not be attracted by the glitter of material nature, and in this way the conditioned soul may be saved. One should not degrade oneself by attraction to sense objects. The more one is attracted by sense objects, the more one becomes entangled in the material existence. The best way to disentangle oneself is to always engage the mind in Krishna consciousness or God consciousness. So, and when we say Krishna consciousness or God consciousness, all that really means is that our mind is constantly thinking of God and things in relation to that. So, if something comes into our life that is a problem or a struggle or whatever, we could look at it as, God, just please let me try to handle this with the best ability, and let me see this as a lesson or as an opportunity to grow. It's not this idea of being brainwashed or anything like this. It's just reestablishing our minds so that we're constantly thinking in the grander scale of things and not getting so caught down in just the material, like the temporary. At the end of the day, the rents and the bills and everything else that we stress so much about, they're gone. Like money is, as we all know, we make money and we spend money. It's here and it's gone in a heartbeat. But we spend so much time worrying about things that are like that are temporary and that really are just going to be destroyed at the end of time. And so Krishna consciousness, it gives us an opportunity to kind of maybe look at things in more of a bigger perspective and realize things on more of the eternal grand scale of things instead of just always in the temporary nature of things. So the word he is also used for emphasizing this point, i.e. that one must do this. It is also said, Mane eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho Badaya Vishaya Shango Muktiyai Visham Manaha. For man, mind is the cause of bondage, and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense objects is the cause of bondage, and mind detached from the sense objects is the cause of liberation. Amrita Bindu Upanishad 2. Therefore, the mind, which is always engaged in Krishna consciousness, is the cause of supreme liberation. Yeah, so I mean, it's like I said, this is a big, really important verse overall. Get my picture back here covering up everything, so I have this nice background for everybody to look at instead of having to stare at all those words. Um, so yeah, so in Srila Prabhupada's purport to verse 6.5, he it really highlights his overall guidance on the mind's role in self-realization and self-control. So much of our time is spent chasing after sense satisfaction. Um, it could be food, all of us, we like tasty stuff. And, a lot of us know that our mind it ends up going towards the non-healthy things. And, we often are thinking about, the sleep that we missed the night before, or what TV show, or, just relaxation in general. Like, so much of our time is spent thinking about these things that are at the end of the day, just enjoyment. And as we indulge in all these things, it feels really good. And our mind gets, well, as you know, addictions it's not just in damaging things. Like, obviously drugs and alcohol, when we get addicted to these things, it's a very huge outward destruction that everyone can see. And you can see the damage it does to your life so evidently. But at the same time, so many of us are addicted to other things that, are societally told to be okay, whether this be our phone or entertainment in term for computers, games, TV. But, shopping is a big one. And just people spending more than they likely should because they can't help themselves. Like, all of us, as we indulge in these things, our mind gets more and more attracted to them. And we see them as an escape from the suffering that we go through, or just, we work hard. All of us have a job and we work really hard to do it. And our mind kind of whispers to us, hey, you deserve this, or you deserve to take a relaxation, and we slowly become unaware that at the end of the day, our mind is the one that's directing us. And it's often taking us in a direction that's kind of bad for us. How many of us are sitting in bed at night and have had thoughts about, tomorrow and what we're going to do different and how we're going to change things, whether that be we're going to eat healthier, maybe less time on our phone. I know a lot of us come up with different tactics to, you erase apps, you turn off notifications, and you think of these different ways. But at the end of the day, really, it's self-control. And, so many of us were thinking of all these different things that we know at the end of the day are better for us. And they're the things that will actually help us. But then we wake up and we do all the things we wanted to stop doing. And this is because most of us have become slaves to our own mind. If we had a friend outwardly that told us as many lies as our own mind, we wouldn't be friends with them very much. Like, often you'll say to yourself, just, well, I'll just gonna have one more unhealthy food, and or just one more of this, and everything will change tomorrow. And let's just, tomorrow we'll start to the gym, tomorrow we'll do this. And constantly we lie to ourselves. And I think one of the big things is that we really need to have a new idea of what the mind is, because the mind is the friend or the enemy, but it really depends on who's leading who, right? And I think a big thing is that a lot of us, we don't really ever even contemplate what the mind is, or where our thoughts come from. And the mind really is both a friend and an enemy in many of our lives. And it's an extremely powerful force, but we forget that it's just like any other muscle, or maybe it's a tool, right? Or a computer. It's not actually who we are. We often get our thoughts confused with ourself. And this is it was a big change in my life. And it's kind of what led me down to the road to spirituality in general, was as I slowly started to, well, okay, so we'll start with this, right? Like the Descartes quote, I think, therefore I am. I really think has screwed a lot of people's perception of what our mind is and the relationship it has with our daily lives. And, I talked to my mom before about this, and how Prabhupada's main teaching, he emphasizes so much. If anybody ever listens to a Prabhupada lecture or anything like this, there's very few lectures that he won't go into about you are not the body. You are not the body. And I think one of the big things that a lot of us struggle with is that idea, because we so much identify with the body. And it's this whole thing of I think, therefore I am, right? So because we're often trapped in our own thoughts, it's hard to separate our thoughts from ourself. And the mind is a big thing. Separating what the mind from ourself and is the only way that we can actually ever gain control over ourselves and gain control over our mind. And so, gaining control of our mind, it can help us escape some of the influences and behaviors that we've slowly become so accustomed to that we just think it's us. We get trapped in these thought patterns and we just kind of blame it as that's who we are, or that's the way I am. And it's just not true. Like, for example, I always thought, I just wasn't very courageous. One of the things that I don't think often understand is that courage really doesn't exist until after the fact. It's not until after we act in spite of the fear that anyone would ever say that we've been courageous. It takes time and it takes some effort to get to the point where we can really see that you have to act on these things. You have to walk through it. And it's our mind, right? The mind, we have to remember what the mind originally was created for. Thousands of years ago, the mind, it was created as a safety mechanism, right? As a warning system. And so many of the world, especially at the beginning of time when we were created, was out to get us, right? Like so many of the plants were, the environment itself was, the saber-toothed tigers. And so our mind really does emphasize danger over safety in our perception of what reality is. And unfortunately, as the society and our life has evolved, our mind necessarily hasn't kept up with it. And so it doesn't really always understand the difference between like a saber-toothed tiger and our taxes, or speaking up in a meeting and challenging a king, or something like this, right? So it's one of the reasons why I think gratitude is such an important practice that we can all practice in order for just getting that understanding of what really is and what our world really is. Because like I said, we get so caught up in the dangers and the worries, right? And they're all real. Like, being scared about taxes, or being scared about if you have enough money, or, obviously with us moving right now, so much of it is about finances, right? And everything that we're stressed out about is very real. It's not like it's pretend. But at the same time, there's so many things to be grateful for. And I think sometimes we lose sight of, well, it's funny, right? It's almost the opposite of the needle in the haystack is, if we look at our life's really this massive stack of all these little small needles of straw that we should be thankful for. So much of the world doesn't even have an internet connection like we have to even be able to do something like this or watch something like this. And, so much of the world doesn't have food and is worried about things that, we're worried about. When will we be able to go to the nicer restaurant, or I wish I had a better meal. A lot of the world doesn't even have food at all. And I think so many of us take things that a lot of people would be grateful for, and we take them for granted. And then we end up really hyper focusing on the things that we wish were different in our life. And we end up, as a result, really missing out on the joy of living. It's again why it's so important just to really help the mind see that we're safe and content. And then we can begin to see the opportunities that God presents to us in our daily life. It's a process of being thankful, and once we start to cultivate this more grateful feeling of the everyday occurrences that we go through, we'll start to kind of see that the bumps in the road are just that. They're bumps in a long line of really good things that's happened to us. And I think it starts to become a little bit easier to see the positive in your life. And, you know, meditation is really the key in achieving a lot of this, because you really, not a lot of us spend enough time even really seeing what the mind is. And I don't think a lot of us even really pay attention to the thoughts that are going on. And, you know, we get these, like I said, these patterns of thought, these narratives, these self-perpetuating narratives that we have in our mind, and they just kind of run wild with it. And, you know, next thing you know, we've gone down this rabbit hole of just self-doubt, and we end up trapped 5-6 years down the road in the exact place that we didn't want to be. And so much of it is just, when we hyper focus on the things we don't want, we end up really bringing them into our world, right? There's a process in the brain called the reticular activation system. And the reticular activation system, you know, when you buy a new car, for instance, or you see a pair of shoes or buy shoes or whatever, and then all of a sudden you start seeing them everywhere, right? They were always there. It's just that because there's so much information coming at our brain at any given time, our brain has to kind of sort out what it thinks we need to see. And the things that we need to see are the things that we're constantly focusing on. And so, like, you know, the Secret is a really famous movie and book about the law of attraction. And in a lot of ways, the law of attraction is real, but it's only in so much. It's not like this manifestation. It's not this mumbo jumbo, but it's really like what we see in our mind will end up holding in our hand, right? And if that's bad things, if that's negative things, if that's like you get into a relationship and the first thing in your thought pattern is like, oh, what's going to go wrong in this? What am I going to do wrong? How is this going to be ruined this time, or whatever, right? These things will end up coming to fruition because your reticular activation system is seeking the things out that you're focusing on. And it's blocking out all the other things. So if we don't cultivate a meditation practice that allows us to even realize the things that we're thinking about and dwelling on, the things that are running in the background, you know, like I'm on a screen right now running this live stream, and I have multiple windows open, and there's a bunch of windows open that are hidden. And, you know, if I wasn't aware of what windows I had hidden, you know, you often see this on your phone, right? Like you open the browser so many times that you just forget to close them sometimes. And so you're constantly opening new ones. Well, there's all these things running in the background that you don't realize are running, and they're taking up valuable space. And next thing you know, your computer's slowed down. Well, the exact same thing happens with us, right? We don't remember that these thought patterns are running in the background, but that doesn't mean they're not there. And so until we go and deep dive into it and start to really see what makes ourselves tick, that's the only time we can actually start to dismantle these things, right? The mind has a way of thinking it's helping us, but in actuality, it's doing the exact opposite what our soul wants to do. And that's where it ends up becoming this disconnection between the mind being a friend or the mind being an enemy. You know, likely some of you, when you hear this, you know, the mind is the friend or the enemy, it's just like, come on, like, what are you talking about? But I mean, obviously these are extreme situations with schizophrenics and manic depressives and things like this, bipolar, right? But in those situations, the mind literally is fighting against the host, right? There's such a disconnect between the mind and the person, the soul, that the mind is almost doing opposite of what it can. So we know already that in extreme situations, the mind can literally be self-destructive to the host, right? So why then do we think that we're all immune to it? Do we think that these little things that are running in the background aren't also there for us, right? They may not be massively self-destructive, but it doesn't mean that they're beneficial either, right? And so meditation is the key to achieving self-realization. And, you know, as suggested by the verse, really, just starting to pay attention, just by incorporating a simple meditation practice, you can help to foster some self-awareness of what these thoughts are. And one of the big things for me was, in order to start to realize that we aren't the body, we are not the mind, that we're a spirit soul, you first really need to realize the separation between the mind and the body. So much of our time is spent in this vehicle we call a body. And really that's what it is, right? We're driving it around, and just like a car, it's absolutely no different. If you give the car bad fuel, you don't do oil changes, you don't get the brakes done, you don't get transmission done, right? You don't clean it, everything else. You could be the best driver in the world. Say you don't get new window wipers and you can't see the road when it's raining. You could be the absolute best driver in the world, but your vehicle is trash, right? And it's the exact same thing with our body. Like you see some people that are elevated minds, but they've let their body wither away to such an extent that their mind and their personality are just diminished to such an extent that it's like they're a shell, right? I'm sure a lot of us have heard that saying, they're a shell of who they used to be. And so realizing that separation between mind and body, it slowly helps us break down the illusion that our mind is in control and that, I think, therefore I am. Yes, thinking is a big part of consciousness, but it's not actually consciousness. It's, like I said, it's just a mechanism that's been created, almost like a safety mechanism to help us, to help guide the consciousness. But it's a tool or a muscle. It's not who we are. It's not the be all end all. And so, like, I really like the last paragraph of the purport that Srila Prabhupada was talking about. Mana eva manushya nam karanam banda mokshayo bandaya vishaya sango muktaya nivishyam manaha. For man, mind is the cause of bondage, and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense objects is a cause of bondage, and mind detached from sense objects is the cause of liberation. So once again, I think a lot of people, when they hear stuff like this detached mind, detached from sense objects, they think that they're going to be, you're supposed to be kind of emotionless and, maybe a little bit numb. But it's the exact opposite, right? By detaching our mind from the things that bring sense satisfaction and the things that really, they really draw our mind to them, right? All these things. But if we can detach from these things, we actually then can spend more time being grateful for the small things that we experience every day. I often tell people that the one thing for me with Krishna consciousness that changed my life is that it gave me this simultaneous perspective of appreciating the small things in life, and then also having the perspective of the grander scale of the universe. And so you can appreciate the miracle and how we're a intricate part of the grand scheme of things, and how God is literally in each and every one of our lives. But at the same time, we can also see how each and every single thing, like, the old saying of stop and smell the flowers. It's so true, right? Because when we start to see each of these things as a gift from God, and we start to see each of these things as a miracle for what they are, all of a sudden we can really appreciate the small little things in life. And so once again, this verse, it's so important. The mind really can be both the friend and the enemy, and it all depends on whether or not we're in control of the mind or the mind is in control of us. Often one of the most famous pictures of the Bhagavad Gita is Krishna and Arjuna in the chariot, right? And the chariot's a really good example of us, of what we are and how we interact with the world. So if you imagine the chariot with a driver and 5 horses in front of the driver, okay? Now, the chariot itself is like our body, right? So yeah, so the material body is like the chariot, right? And like I said earlier, talking about the chariot or the body in the terms of a car, we could also use the car, but in this aspect, it's really helpful to think of it a chariot with 5 horses in front. And so the body itself is being pulled around by these 5 horses in the form of the senses, right? So hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell are the 5 different senses. And each of us is like a spiritual soul, and we're riding along in this body, right? And the horses, the only way we can keep the horses on course is by if we're controlling all the reins together, right? So the driver has to control the reins. Well, what if each of the reins kind of thought they were in control and they were pulling, the different horses in the form of the senses in every different direction, right? We would never be able to go in a straight scene or a straight line. It would always be pulling us in all these different directions. And, to keep the horses on course, we have to have the reins of our mind, right? And the driver, basically our intelligence. And as we've all experienced, right, the horses are often like in the form of our senses. Our senses are always ready to bolt off in every direction, right? You hear something, you smell something, you taste something. It's always causing these like anxieties and wants within the body or within the mind. And the problem is that we don't really have anything to anchor where we really want to go, right? So imagine if you had a horse that was really into the sounds of the battle, and another horse that was really attracted to the smells of the battle, and you had another horse that was really attracted to the sights of the battle, and they were always going in different directions. And this is often what happens with us is we find ourselves going in so many different directions, right? And so the problem is that when we don't have anything permanent, we see that the chariot's breaking down, and our body's breaking down, our family or whatever, our community, all these different things are changing, and they're taking our attention from one thing to another. And the only real way to try to change things is by quieting the mind, right? That's how we can kind of get control of the reins of our body and unify it so that all our senses are understanding that we're going towards a particular goal. Okay. The only way that can ever happen is by quieting the mind. And so by going into some silent meditation, you start to realize that, oh, I see, right? The reason why I can't stop doing this is because my mind's always got this idea that that's what I want. And my mind's always attracted to this, right? And then as you start to see that body and mind separation through silent meditation, the next step that you can do after that is that's when you start to need to have a real anchor or a place to focus everything on. And that's when japa, like mantra meditation, right? So we use the Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. But you can, I highly recommend using that one, but some people find that one as a beginning one a little difficult. It's supposed to be a little bit difficult to pronunciate, because if it's, one of the mantras I started with when I first started doing mantra meditation was Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. And obviously that one flows, right? And it's a very easy one to do for an extended period. And again, for me, it was very beneficial. What that mantra literally means is it's opening up the jewel of your heart. And one of the things that I realized for myself was that my heart chakra was blocked. And I was having a really hard time, through emotional traumas in my past and everything. I was just having a hard time opening up emotionally. And our heart chakra in particular, it's like a doorway. So when you're going through the process of opening your chakras, The first one you're going to do is your root chakra, Muladhara. And you can get to a certain point, right? So you can go up through your sacral chakra and your solar plexus chakra. But once you get to your heart chakra, you need to really do a work, because if you haven't opened up the top, there's a blockage, and you can't go any higher than that, right? And so for whatever reason, I was attracted to the Om Mani Padme Hum, and it worked, right? And you know, one of the things I think in general with ISKCON, I'm kind of want to go on a tangent here, actually. So we're only going to do this for about another 5-10 minutes today, because we'll see how it goes. But I started a little late, but again, at least we did it, right? And so one of the things that in the modern teachings of ISKCON that bother me a little bit is all throughout the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, it talks about a progression. And the progression that we have to go through is we first need Brahman realization, right? Is we first need to realize that we're a spirit soul. And for me personally, the way that I found that, realization, you know, often when I talk about this, people are blown away, right? And they often doubt me, because the things that the way it talks about is like, this is elevated stuff, right? And in terms of the ISKCON and the Gaudiya Vaishnav Sampradaya, I'm very new, you know, I'm only been around it for about 6 years. I'm going on, I just had my year anniversary of my first initiation. I will be going for second initiation, likely next year. But still, you know, there's people that have been in it for 20 years, and I don't think a lot of them have had this realization, the Brahman realization for real. I think many of us realize it in terms of theoretical, but so much of what Prabhupada talked about and why they call this a spiritual science is that if you actually apply the techniques, you will experience it. It's not some like pie in the sky, let's hope, right? This is something that you will, if you properly apply the things. And unfortunately, I don't really know if it's necessarily being taught correctly in terms of how they wanted it to be, how the Vedas tells us to. And so the three realizations are Brahman realization, Paramatma realization, and then Bhagavan realization. And so for me, I really think that each of those are best achieved through specific styles of meditation. So again, for me, the Brahman realization only came through silent meditating, right? I think a lot of us, when we have the experience of silent meditation, we get frustrated because we're trying to quiet the mind and the mind just won't quiet. What we don't understand, and thankfully I had some really good teachers on this that really pointed this out right away to me, is the goal isn't actually to quiet the mind. It's the opposite, right? The opposite. It's to slowly try to control the mind through having an anchor point, right? So you anchor everything on your breath, and all you do is constantly go back to the breath. So you say, I'm going to concentrate on the breath, and then you'll realize that you're thinking about something, you know, and sometimes it's even like, oh, I'm doing such a great job thinking about the breath. And what will eventually happen is that you'll see that these thoughts are happening independently of your control. Okay. Because what will eventually happen is you start to get to the point where you are focusing on the breath, but simultaneously there's also thoughts going on separate. And that's when you first have this realization that, oh man, I'm not the body, right? See, the mind is also part of the body. The mind is also part of the mechanism. If we want to think of, again, this car analogy, the mind is like the central processing unit of the car. It controls, all the things that the driver doesn't control. Our breath, our blood pressure, all the digestion, all these autonomic system. These are all things that the brain controls. Like, they say often, you hear this, like that we only use whatever, 20% of the brain or something like this. But that's at any given moment, right? Like we're constantly switching between different areas of the mind as we access things. Like right now I'm talking, at different points I'll be reading, and we kind of go to different areas of the mind. Again, this shows that the mind is a tool. It's not who we are. And through the silent meditation, you start to see this, that there's thoughts happening simultaneous of your focus being on the breath. And when you first have that realization, it's like a crazy, and you kind of can't go back after that. You still get caught up because, just like I said, right? The mind has been in control for so long, or the mind's kind of had free reign for so long, that it's hard not to. And it is a tool, and we need to use it, right? Like, you can't just go walk around on autopilot all the time. You'd get hit by a car, right? So we have to pay attention to these things. But at the same time, we have to realize that it's not who we are. Okay. And so once you get to that point, that was when I kind of come to a plateau in some ways. And I found that, silent meditation only got me so far. It brought me some relief, but it just doesn't last necessarily. You plateau, right? Because the senses do need a place to go. And so that's when I came upon mantra meditation. And for me, like I said, I needed to open up my heart. And what's amazing is, like, all this was before I found the Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. So I was doing all this independently of any real why. It was just what seemed right to me, right? And all these things along my path are what kind of led me to understand that Krishna was in my life, that God was in my life, and talking to me, right? And was leading me on this. And so when I started the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra and realized that this was like opening up the heart chakra, and then when I got into the Gaudiya Vaishnava, and you find out that it's the Paramatma, and Paramatma is God in our heart. So we have God sitting next to our soul, right within our heart, right? That's where our eternal soul is. It's seated in our heart, and God's in there as well. And so when we all of a sudden realize that we're not alone, our soul's in here with God, that takes us to the next step. And when that happened for me, that was when I asked, what do you want? And he led me to the Hare Krishnas. And, again, thankfully, I'd already been introduced to mantra meditation. And so then I found japa. I found the Maha Mantra, right? And that's when I started to really see that it was God. Before that, I had a bit of a Buddhist philosophy, right? I would consider myself Buddhist at that time. And so all this is like a process, right? And again, like I said, the whole point of all this is that we have to understand that the only way that we can make growth is by taking control of the mind. And we need to bypass the part of the mind that kind of, it tries to convince us of things, right? And there's a part of us that wants to believe and have faith. Again, using as example these different things, like, I want to get in shape, and then the mind will step in and say, what's the point? You go to the gym for a week and you look in the mirror and you don't see any progress, and your mind's trying to convince you that there's no point. Why are you even bothering, right? This is the kind of stuff that it does to us on a regular basis, right? And this is why we really need to take control of it, because what we don't realize is that by trying to keep us safe and out of danger, the mind is actually really limiting what our possibilities are. And it's really limiting the opportunities and the purpose that God has given all of us. And so at a certain point, we just have to understand that we need to go by this. And so, I hope all this makes sense. For me, this is a verse that really exemplifies why the Bhagavad Gita is so applicable to modern life. From relationships to professional life, to friendships, to learning, to getting old, to dying. The mind is our constant companion. And if we don't get control of it, it will control us. And so we can either be a slave to the mind, where the mind can be a very powerful tool and a force for good and growth for ourselves. And so it really is, in all of our best interest to try to take advantage of all the teachings that are in the Bhagavad Gita, because it will really lead us, like I said, through experience, right? For me personally, there's so many times that I'll be reading and it's like an aha moment. And there's things that your mind kind of can't argue with. It hits a place of truth that's beyond reason or beyond anything And again, for me, when I read this, the mind throughout my life has really been both my friend and my enemy. But up until the last, I guess, 10 to 15 years, it really is mostly my enemy, right? Like when I look back, different opportunities that passed me by, different things that I wish, the things that I avoided were all based on just things that weren't real. Often if we can be honest with ourselves and we look back, we'll realize that a lot of the anxiety and a lot of the thing we were scared about happening, they never come to fruition, right? And again, that's just a sign that our mind is trying to help us, but in so many ways it's holding us back. And so, I really hope, again, like always, I don't believe that I have anything to teach or give, but I believe that a lot of things that have changed and improved in my life, I think that it could really help a lot of other people. And what I hope is that by continuously sharing what's helped me and the things that have made me into the man that I've become, I'm hoping that even one or two people will get some value out of this and will maybe have some kind of change or some kind of experience similar to the one I had. And if that happens, I am just so grateful, and I feel like all of this has been worthwhile. So on that, anyone who's been watching this, I just can't tell you how appreciative I am. If you have any questions, please let me know. Like I said, the last couple streams, I do have still some Bhagavad Gitas that I could send out to people. So especially if you're in the Vancouver or Lower Mainland area, let me know and I'll deliver them to you, or we could ship them, or whatever works for you. So mmdas Haran, mmdashoran@gmail.com. Or you can leave a comment or like here and just let me know what you think. Please, any questions, any comments, anything you think, any of your own experiences with your mind and how it's, can be both a enemy and a friend. I'd love to start a conversation. Again, the whole purpose of this is to start a community, and we're moving to a bigger house soon. So regardless if we get this one that we looked at yesterday, we will be moving to a new house soon, and we'll have a lot bigger area. I'll be having some live classes and programs and things like this there. And I really want to build a community where this isn't just an online thing. So especially for people in our local area. So on that note, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got some value out of this. Like I said, please leave me a comment. I think I'm going to be doing 3 days a week. So Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. And then I'm also doing Twitch streams as well. Some weekend nights, right? It's a way that I kind of made myself able to play the odd game and also still feel like I'm being productive. So yeah, I hope you guys got value out of this. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll see you guys Wednesday. I'm not sure yet what verse we're going to be doing. We might just go back to the old, the way of doing it. We left off in chapter 2. So, but like I said, today, I really felt 6.5, was really important. And just to go over it one more time, one must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. So please, 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 do your best to make sure that your mind is being your friend, and be aware that if we're not paying attention, the mind will lead us in the wrong direction. And, so much of like what I said earlier, often we think of courage as this thing that's just bravery is the same way. We think of it as this innate thing that we see in people. But courage and bravery are two things that aren't really described until after the fact. In order to act, we must act in spite of fear, and we must act in spite of our mind telling us not to. And it's only through doing that that we find our true purpose in life. So, it's really, really important that we can try to somehow take control of our thoughts and really be the creator of our own destiny. So with that, have a wonderful day. Hare Krishna. And I look forward to building this community with you. So have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.